Okay, it's about 7:04 p.m. Central Standard Time, and it is Wednesday, April the 20th, 2022. Welcome to week number three of Introduction to Corrections. My name is Richard Wright, and I'm going to take some time to go over the details and information of what is involved in this week's assignments. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so here we are at the home page. Let's take a look at the assignments for the week through the grade book. And you can see the written assignment is going to be sentencing fact sheet. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. The discussion post that was due last night, your initial post on state's prison programming. Then you have the quiz, which is due on Sunday, and your live classroom lecture. So let's go ahead and take a look at the course calendar. As you can see, we are approaching the second half of the course. This takes us to where we are today. So your initial post was due yesterday. Your lecture is now. Your discussion post for reply is due the 23rd Saturday. And then your live classroom lecture, phrase or word is due Sunday along with the quiz and written assignment. Okay. And then after this week, I will not accept any assignments from week number 3. Okay. Unless you have extenuating circumstances. To my recollection, I don't have anybody that has any of that. And then just a reminder that the course ends on the 10th. The 10th, that's the last day any assignments will be accepted. And that includes weeks 4 through 6. All right. No exceptions unless you got an appropriately approved incomplete. And it is I who determine that, but you have to let me know. So far, so here we go for week number 3. The roles of prisons, punishment, and programming I'll be talking about. And I sent you the PowerPoints for chapters 4 and 14 of the textbook. And we're going to look at the activities, institutional programming, changing philosophies, core rehabilitative programs. And then we're going to examine a little bit of determinate and indeterminate sentencing, and then vocabulary review. So your discussion assignment, again, was due yesterday, and that's states, prisons, programming. And your reply post, again, is due Saturday. And finally, on Sunday, your written assignment, sentencing fact sheet, and the quiz, and then, of course, the key phrase. And then remind you that my motto, adversity is a springboard to success. You know what that is all about. Okay. So let's get into the module. First, starting with the written assignment. So here you're going to complete a fact sheet. Remember, it's going to be a Word document. So your state is considering a change from indeterminate to determinate sentencing. The option will be placed on the ballot. So what you have to do is create a fact sheet educating the voters as to which type of sentencing what type of sentencing is, as well as the pros and cons of each. So you're going to create a one-page fact sheet that includes the following: defines each type of sentencing, determinate and indeterminate, the elements of each of these, explain at least 2 pros and 2 cons for each, provide credible sources. Here we go. If you don't provide credible sources, you're going to end up getting a 55 or below and failing. Credible sources is citations in the body and reference page, a cover page. So it's APA formatted, cover page, as well as Romans 12. Correct spelling and grammar, of course. Okay, so if it was me, I would provide one side dealing with determinate, the other side with indeterminate, and covering each of these issues, making sure. Now, don't just throw something together. Make sure that it contains and addresses each of these issues, and I will be grading it accordingly. And it must be, as I said, must be a Word document. Let's look at the rubric. So reminding you that if you have incomplete description, incomplete confusing list, and there are spelling errors, you're going to end up over here. And I will put the comments in the grade book so that you will see them. I instead want you to focus on this, using this for sentencing types. An exemplary description, that means citations in the body, not a citation on the elements. By the way, do not rely on the textbook or the PowerPoints or the module. Do some research, otherwise you will lose points for that. The idea of each of assignments is to conduct research. Then the pros and cons. Then, of course, spelling and grammar. It's a pretty straightforward, easy assignment, okay? Any questions? Reach out to me. Okay. Let's look at the discussion post that was due. So you're going to deal with yourself as a board member of your state's new commission, tasked with assessing the current status of your state's prison programming. So you're going to conduct online research, include a short description of type of prisons programs available, including goals and purposes, your thoughts, and then your recommendations for additional, and then reply to another student's post as well. Okay. Let's take a look at the assignments here. The quiz I already talked about. Your live classroom recording. Your live classroom recording, if you click on that, it will take you to this, and then I will clear this out at the end of this lecture and indicate the link for the recorded lecture, and I will also email it to you. And then your live classroom lecture phrase. So let's talk about institutional programming, core rehabilitative programs, and then we're going to deal with determinate and indeterminate sentencing. You'll do an activity yourself, but I'll take you and show you how it works. So let's start out with institutional programming. So what are we dealing with here? So the key issue that we start out by talking about whether our philosophy is punishment or rehabilitation. We of course started out with punishment, as the primary focus of corrections. And what we were dealing with was making sure that individuals got their what they call just desserts or served time, and that they would have time to be isolated, and reflect on what they did wrong. However, though, um, it began to become clear in about 1870 that the isolation didn't address the issue, which was what put the person there in the first place, their behavior. And then we started to move toward reformation. In other words, reforming the individual, which emphasized education and training. And so we never really returned back to the punishment, um, indicating that we want to help individuals. So the top priority in prisons now, as we deal with it, is safety and security of everybody. And how do we do that? Do we do that by including more programs, or do we do that by locking people up? And so the key thing that began to come about is that we begin to move away from punishment to rehabilitation, and to recognize that in order to address the issues that brought a person there, or to minimize recidivism, we had to begin to um, rehabilitate the individual, provide them with opportunities, education, um, um, various vocations, and things of that nature. Okay. So we began to look at and recognize that what we call EBP, evidence-based practices, indicated that it is important to provide skills and things to help individuals. And we began to move towards restoring the individual. And that's when we come to restorative justice, where we look at the issue that caused the person to be there. For example, if the person had a drug problem, we address the drug problem. The alcohol problem. Lack of education, we began to provide education. Um, um, no vocations, and they didn't want to go to school, we began to provide vocational training in many areas. And the whole idea is to minimize the individual's return back to um, the prison. Okay. And we recognize that um, restorative justice um, involves the victim, the offender, and the community, because you have to remember the individuals are going to eventually return back to the community, and we want those individuals to come back as a um, citizen, um, not contributing to crime. If you remember my little clock, in other words, getting them from 12 o'clock at the top, where they got in trouble, to 6 o'clock or 180, and let them grow on that 6 o'clock and go in a new direction in their lives. Okay. So we find ourselves recognizing that um, restorative justice is a good thing, uh, in and the reduction in costing money, because it is cheaper to educate than to incarcerate. It's cheaper to provide vocational opportunities than to keep rearresting someone, putting them behind bars where you have to provide food, shelter, and clothing. And so the point of the matter is that we begin to recognize and understand uh, how things um, were working. Okay. So these philosophies and the programs that we mentioned a few minutes ago uh, assist in rehabilitating individuals so that their mind process, their thought processes is different. Okay. So your institutions will have specific programs based on the each state having the goal to rehabilitate individuals, and that's the key thing. All right, pretty straightforward. So let's talk about some programs. I've already kind of mentioned it a little bit. Um, there's various ways, and you operate in building by dealing with individuals in groups, in dealing with the cognitive skill building, that is the way that people think and begin to restructure their thinking from focusing on crime to focus on an activity or something that would benefit them and overall the community as well. Um, Behavior and social therapies, once again, dealing with redirecting that individual. I referred to educational and vocational programs, substance abuse programs. Then we also have sex offender programs for individuals who are what we call apparent sex offenders. So we want to make sure that they are helped. So one of the things is that we looked at the RNR, which we call as the risk, the need, and responsibility, um, says that we must first help individuals uh, who, at their highest risk level, um, not to recidivate, and to recognize that that's where we find our inmates generally is at that high risk rate until such time as we determine what we need to um, address in terms of the problems. And we're going to talk about the criminogenic needs and factors. And so the primary criminogenic factors involve the history of the individual. So we look at what got them there. What kind of individual have they been as far as crime in their lives? And we don't necessarily judge them on it, but we use this information to help us to get to the point of helping those individuals, looking at their how they think, the attitudes, the values, beliefs based upon many factors in their lives, psychological, biological, some say, but I don't like the biological, but more like how they think, the psycho and the sociology, who they associate with, who affects their day-to-day decision. Is it peers? And shapes and builds their personality. So then we move to the factors, part of what we call the central eight, and that is dealing with what we talked about so far: education and employment. Again, repeating, it is demonstrated statistically that when a person has an education, they're less likely to recidivate. I when I was practicing law, participated in a program called Probation Challenge. And Probation Challenge originated in Justice R. Eugene Pincham's courtroom. He was judged in at 26 in California, now called the Layton Courthouse. And if an individual came before him who did not have their GED, the general education diploma, or did not have their high school diploma, and if they committed a crime that was nonviolent, they were eligible to participate in uh, this program, and the goal was for them to get their GED. If they were successful in getting their GED, they would come back before the judge, and the judge would dismiss the charges. Now, here's what we discovered over the years, that many of those individuals, most of them, did not recidivate because that education was replaced by the thinking to commit crime. And some of them went on and got their associate's degree, as well as some even went even further and got their bachelor's, and at least one we know went on and after getting his life cleared up with the help of the corrections institution, the probation officers, the parole officers, but in this case, probation, they were able to go to law school and become a lawyer, and it did happen. So we recognize that what would assist us is more education and more employment opportunities, vocational skills being developed, um, from being maybe a carpenter, electrician, a barber, a beautician, all of those information technology, working on computers. And so we also recognize that the support of family generally is very important in terms of accomplishing this goal. And so family is part of the central 8 or the secondary criminogenic factors. Substance abuse, we already addressed that. You can give a person all the factors of education, opportunities for education, family support, but if they have a substance abuse problem and it's not addressed, it's not going to do anything but delay them committing crimes. In other words, you must address the issue that put that person there in the first place. Providing opportunities for leisure and recreation. So then finally, the final part of the who and the what is the how. And we do that, as I said, um, through the cognitive behavior approaches. Um, Thinking drives behavior, and thinking can be changed. And so we do that with the rehabilitative programs that I mentioned before, and help individuals to be successful. Okay. So um, if you take some time to look at this video on intensive management units, it provides an example of what one state has done. And so we're not going to spend time on it, but let's just see if it's working. I know it was working before. Let's clear that out. It was, okay. So I don't see. I'll have to try to check to see how we can get this available. Anyway, the point idea is that the institutions provide groups situations where individuals are in groups, and then, as I said, one-on-one as well. All right. So we continue to recognize dealing with interventions and services as change agents to, again, deal with the thinking process. We use a phrase that I'm familiar with from the Bible: so a man thinketh, so is he. So if a man thinks criminal, he's going to become criminal and remain a criminal. If a man thinks highly of himself and is provided with the opportunities to elevate his life and work on the mindset, then we reach the stage where that person is uh, a good candidate for rehabilitation. Okay. All right. So you begin to see that the idea is providing tools to help individuals in those situations. Oops, that's the wrong one. This is so. Let's look at determinate and indeterminate sentencing. So, what is determinate sentencing? First of all, let's take a look at this. Let's look at the sentencing activity. Okay, so when a person is sentenced, the idea is to provide practices to correct the individual. Remember, we talked about this as corrections, and we have to consider the abilities financially of the institution to be able to do so. And each state has its own um, basis for sentencing and how individuals are sentenced. And it's going to be divided appropriately into what we call determinate and indeterminate sentencing. So here's determinate sentencing. So the sentence, when you deal with determinate sentencing, um, is to recidivate the individual and to get that individual um, to a point where they're actually held there for a specific period of time. So you're held, so in other words, a sentence is handed down by the judge. And when you serve that time, you're released. It doesn't matter what kind of training you had, it's the amount of time that you actually serve that the judge issues. The punishment supports retribution, okay? And the key thing there is to give you an idea to, once again, recognize that you're going to be here for a certain period of time in the correction system, and that we hope that at the end of this period that you will not come back or recidivate. So with the set period that the legislature has um, for how long you're going to be there, you're automatically released as an inmate upon a date regardless of the risk or rehabilitative attempts. So let me tell you, Illinois in 1977 passed House Bill, well, actually 78, actually, when I graduated, but 77 is when we did the work, where the first major change of the Illinois Criminal Code of 1961 took place. And we dealt with going from indeterminate sentencing, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes, to determinate sentencing. And the statutes that were written at that particular time indicated that if you committed a specific crime, you'd have a specific amount of incarceration. And so the good part about that from the system of individuals who are incarcerated is that they already knew when a person was released based on the crime. Now, let's say, for example, they committed another crime in there. That's another ball game. But I'm saying in the normal course where the individual is given a period of time, when that sentence is set, so you can have 6 to 30 maybe as a range. And if the judge commits you to 6, you'd finish that 6 and then you would be released pretty much, or close to that 6, or at least 2/3 of that 6. So there was no release before that. Okay. So therefore what that did was it freed up how much bed space, and it dealt with the ability for the jurisdiction to plan financially, and as to how many individuals are going to be incarcerated at any given time. So there's more information in this. This is just a thumbnail sketch of what determinate sentence is. Just remember, it lists a specific time that you will be incarcerated, and your release date is easily calculated. All right, let's go to the next one. So let's talk about indeterminate sentencing. So with indeterminate sentencing, there's a main focus on rehabilitation, even though in the other there is too. But keep in mind, whether you're rehabilitated or not, whether you're treated for your drug problem or not, if you get more education or not, you're still released by that date. In this instance, rehabilitation is very important, and it depends on how you operate there. And so it's not easy to calculate the number of inmates who are there, because release dates is not known until it happens. Okay. In other words, the release date is undetermined, and the paroling board decides what it will be. So no one knows when that person will be released. They do have an idea, though, that a certain percentage would be completed. Now, be very careful that you don't mix determinate with indeterminate. More rigid in terms of the amount of time is determinate. Less rigid is indeterminate. And then the paroling authority decides from that point. Not to mention the fact that in determinate sentencing, the judge has less discretion and more discretion in indeterminate sentencing. So there's more parity in determinate sentencing than indeterminate sentencing. All right. So here's what you learn. A determinate sentencing is a blank utilizing sentencing guidelines. Okay. And so you type your answer in here, and then you would submit it. So I'm not going to go over that. I'll let you do that yourself. Here it is right here. And there that's your 6 questions. So you're going to go over those. All right. Well, that's about all I have for today. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me. And so What I need to do is give you a key phrase. And the key phrase I want to give you is one I'm familiar with based on my state, and that is determinate sentencing. Determinate sentencing. Provide me with that, and you get your points. Okay, well, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Hope you're having a good week, and I'll see you next Wednesday at 7:00 p.m. Central Standard with the week 4 lecture. Have a good one. Good night.